I think we're live. All right. So this is a very special moment for Latinx Education Collaborative, for myself, and specifically, and more importantly, for Dr. Nicole Price, who today celebrates 5 years of Lively Paradox. And so I don't know if this is your last conversation today. I know you've been doing this all day, but I have some questions and some curiosities. I don't know if that's the right word, around your experiences today and what you learned. So I appreciate you joining. Before I get into any heavy and deep questioning here, how do you feel?
I feel remarkable. This has been a day full of me being generous, and generosity always fills me up. Um, and everyone I was giving to was so complimentary about the solid advice that I give, because I try to stick within things I know very well. So I think I am grateful, um, and energized, and feeling much different than I usually do on a Thursday about this time.
What's your filter free Friday going to be about tomorrow?
I know. So I probably will. I'm trying to remember, what did I talk about? Move the ball Monday, because I do try to connect them. People, I don't know if people realize that, but I do try to connect the thoughts. And I thought about the subtle acts of exclusion on Monday, and I invited people to think about why they do them, like why do they engage in subtle things that leave people out. So I'll tie it to that in some way. But yeah, I've been going since 5:45. My very first person was a super fan from Canada, Quebec.
Did you speak French at all? A
Um,
little Quebecois?
un peu.
So what was the most surprising moment today? As you were giving advice, as you know, you're talking about issues that are important to you, like, what was your most surprising moment?
I think it was when Kiana Thomason, the CEO over at Health Forward Foundation, got on. I mean, she's a very busy woman, lots of pulls on her time. So when she saw the email and she got in, and she stayed on for quite a while, just talking about the partnership that Lively Paradox has with her. I was pretty grateful. I was shocked by that, and honestly couldn't believe it. So so that was good. I think I was shocked by how people stayed on so long, because we were on Instagram Live, we were everywhere. So which I don't know if that's a good strategy, but I was like, hey, I want to hit all the fans, and they're different. So whenever someone jumped in on my Zoom, then I would get off of whatever platform I was on and talk to whoever was on Zoom. But on Instagram, some people stayed on for like an hour, just listening to me and my team talk about the journey. And I think I thought that was surprising that people would be that interested in the story.
As you reflect on like your last 5 years, specifically today, what brings you the most joy?
It probably happens less frequently than I know, but when someone says that I have helped them to be able to raise their level of awareness that they need to do something differently in order to impact systemic racism or homophobia or other issues that kind of separate us. Because sometimes I think, as you know, this work can feel like, you're counting the grains of sand on the beach. And so when someone takes the time to share, and sometimes it's 5-10 years later, to share that, hey, you opened my heart to be able to learn more about this, or my heart was already open, you opened my mind to think about this differently. That gives me lots of joy. That gives me lots of joy, because this is hard work, you know.
It definitely is hard work. I've gotten to be a witness to your work and see your growth, both as a business owner and personally as this. And one thing that I really appreciate about you, and one thing that I reflected on after our conversation today, is actually how comfortable and at ease you are in having these discussions. And I can't imagine, I could be wrong here, but I think like maybe towards the beginning, and I didn't know you. I think I knew of you. Maybe we had an interaction or two back 5 years ago. But do you feel more at ease having these conversations? Do you feel more in purpose, in alignment with your work than you did 5 years ago? Or do you still maybe get a little anxious or get a little nervous around the work that you're doing?
Yeah, 5 years ago, I think you could still surprise me. I hadn't seen enough to not be surprised. But when you are talking to people, trust me, and especially in our executive coaching sessions, there are people who say things that they absolutely cannot say publicly because it would be the death nail in a coffin for their companies. And when you're doing that every week, day in and day out, you learn not to be surprised. I mean, I still get disappointed in people, but or in people's thoughts, but I'm not. I don't know how much people can surprise me anymore about their racist thoughts and ideas, the bigotry, discriminatory thoughts that people have, and because of that, I can sit and listen for understanding, not accuracy. I'm not listening anymore to debate people on an issue because I have now read enough about race and racism specifically, not necessarily, let's talk about race, that some of people's opinions, you know, if you want to disprove facts, but don't have opinions about facts. And so the scientist in me is like, we can talk opinions all day about whether the weather is nice or whether you think it's hot and I think it's not. But we can't have opinions about whether or not there's systemic racism in this country. So when someone says that, it's almost as if, when my son was 2 or so and he'd be like, oh, the sky is pink. And you're like, it's blue. And it would be ridiculous to argue with him, but just kind of understanding where he's coming from, and not to make some people seem childish, but their understanding of the topic is absolutely at the remedial level. And so, I don't know if you've heard me say this before, but Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility, I never intended to read it because she wrote it for white people. But I had a white friend who wanted me to come to a book club discussion they were having. And so I don't go to book club discussions without reading books, unlike some people I know.
No shade towards me.
No shade. But I just bought a ridiculously expensive lamp. And the lamp came in a box that said, fragile, handle with care. And for whatever reason, I've seen that sticker a bunch of times, but for whatever reason, it resonated with me that when things are fragile, we handle them with care. And I think sometimes people think that we are coddling folks who might be fragile. And I see it differently. My desire is not to break people. My desire is to handle people. The handling is still going to occur, but I'm going to do so with care. And I think, to your question, that allows me to be able to, in 5 years of doing this, has allowed me to settle in. And I used to get into arguments. That doesn't happen very much. I mean, I can't think of the last time I got into an argument with somebody about this topic.
I'm glad you mentioned white fragility. I had a conversation earlier in the week around white fragility, and it was about like our responsibility as Black and brown folks to help white folks move along on this journey, right? And what's our capacity or not? Clearly, Black and brown folk have also work to do with bias and some of these issues from a very different perspective. But it was really interesting to have that conversation around what is our responsibility, and when we cater, or when it feels like we're catering to the fragility or the fragile nature of white folks, it feels like we're centering them sometimes, right? Which is something that we talk about. Be like, that's not what we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to center over like white experiences, right? In this work. So I think about the opposite though. and this is just me in curiosity, this is me doing my own work and my own internal work on this. Are we caring for the feelings and emotions of the Black and brown people who do this work?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you might have been the one who told me to take over the week because I do Mondays and Tuesdays and Fridays. And I was thinking about doing something on Wednesday, and I don't know what to call it. Wellness Wednesday doesn't feel right, but where I'm truly just pouring back into the people who are doing the work because it's hard, and celebrating the triumphs that have happened, because small things happen every day, that are good, um, that are dismantling it. I think about what's happening at the Kansas City, Missouri School District, where the suspensions have been, there's a moratorium on suspensions. That's a win. And the folks over at Moore Squared and whoever else was involved in that work, that we need to celebrate that more. If it were something negative, let's say a kindergartner ended up in handcuffs, as does happen in districts for which I've supported, we would be talking about that for weeks, right? And so why don't we talk about the good things for weeks? Because I think being grateful for something every day that is going well, and then also celebrating those successes. That's why I said, I'm gonna spend the whole day celebrating. It's a win to get to this point as a Black woman who couldn't get any funding, to start my business. I had to do so with my own money. I think sometimes we forget that we need to pause and celebrate and pour in. And I think that's part of my work to do. So I'm grateful that you brought it up. Like, what are we doing to care for Black and brown folks? But when I think about white folks, I'm like, well, I just want to be clear. I'm like, it still gets handled, right? It's just, I'm not battling with you. And one charge that I have for white allies or white people when they come along is when they ask me, and I saw this in her book too, what can I do to bring my family along? Or, I'm going to stop talking to my family. I'm like, that's your burden to carry, actually, because if you stop talking to them, then they end up in class with me trying to be centered. And I need you to do that. I need you to do your work there. So Wellness Wednesday, you're usually pretty good with the naming. What should I call it?
I mean, I like Wellness Wednesday. You can call it Woke Wednesday.
Oh, woke. Everybody's tired of that word. How
everybody's tired of it.
How we get that word.
So I see in the background.
I really am not. I'm not.
Listen, I'm a boring person, Dr. Price. So I understand it's a reflection on me.
One of my most exciting things that's happened the entire time in all 5 years that I've been doing this work is that usually when a singular white person can shut down the work because of something I've said that is social justice related in some way, usually that's it. That's just, the money's just gone. And there was this one time when this guy with the Latinx Education Collaborative said, you know what, let us sponsor that session for those teachers and principals who want to come. I don't remember how many people we had in that session, but it was very well attended. It was about 3 hours. And I mean, that's a high moment. That was a very high moment.
I mean, I think it's important, right? I think this work is critical, and we're seeing legal challenges to it across the country. We're seeing ways of erasing, continuing to erase the voices of Black and brown kids, Black and brown families across the way. And so we have a responsibility as an organization to continue to push, right? It's not comfortable.
Not at all.
We get a lot of feedback around, how we push or why we push, or, are we pushing in the right ways? And, who are we loyal to sometimes, right? But I think these conversations ultimately impact the outcomes of our students. And forget like the educational aspects of this. Like, this is our future leaders that we're not investing in, that we're not preparing for these conversations, because I know that 20, 30 years from now, we may have made a few advancements, but the reality is, like, this work will still continue.
I was wondering why this fervent backlash. And then I saw that the demographic shift in K through 12 education is that, white students in public education are the minority. It's barely, but they are the minority. And then I saw that some major cities are shifting. Um, Philadelphia is no longer number 5. Phoenix is, and those are brown people by and large. And I think, and this is my opinion, but you can give me what you think about this if you know. But when you know what you act like when you're the majority, and you know that that's unfair and unjust and inequitable, you expect that somebody else, when they get into the majority, are going to do the exact same thing to you. And I would argue that what evidence do we have of that, though?
I would say we have some counter evidence actually
Right.
historically on that. I've been doing a lot of reading on this, and by the way, you also have some friends in the background here that I think we'll bring up here shortly, Shanita, and I think Deidre, although I'm not sure, but we'll bring it up here momentarily. And we got Tina
Taylor
as well. So we'll bring some of your friends out. I don't think they may have not had an opportunity to talk to you today. So part of this is give you that opportunity to continue to engage with your folks. But I've been reading a lot around from a Latino perspective, right? I think our community has struggled with this concept of whiteness, right? Mm-hmm. And it's rooted in assimilation. It's rooted in anti-blackness. It's a lot of things that are happening that create our community, the issues and the circumstances that allow us to struggle with whiteness. Yeah. And historically, it's fascinating to me that this started back in 1848 when the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was placed into effect, and Mexicans at that time had up to a year to decide if they were going to become American citizens or not. And at that time, the definition of a citizen, based on the 1790 Naturalization Act, was that in order to be a citizen of this country, you had to be free and a white and white. Those were the qualifications of being a citizen. And so awkwardly, when Mexicans decided to become citizens,
they also decided to become white.
Well, I don't think they decided to become white, but they were definitely legal. Like there was a loophole there, right? Like I'm a citizen, therefore I am white. But it's fascinating to understand the history after that, right? Because you would think, oh wow, like now you're white, problem solved. The reality is that Mexican Americans at that time were still discriminated against.
Of course.
And they had no legal recourse because if you're white, you can't discriminate against other white folks.
Right. Not by law.
Right. Not by law. And so that interesting loophole, right, of like, here you are attaining whiteness through the law. And even then, like now you're stuck in this catch-22 situation where you're legally white, but you're socially brown. So there, and so it's really interesting to see how that plays out within our community to this day. And I think it was until like the early 1970s, I could be wrong, but like that Mexican Americans were actually considered their own separate ethnic minority. Legally. Yep. So since 1848 to 1970, in 1970 is not that long ago.
Right.
So, anyways, so whiteness, Latinos, the history of whiteness, and yeah, there's no, even the white people will figure out how to retain power, even though they're the minority, or they might actually, I think, are they the minority? They'll be the minority.
That was also on, I never watched television, but I tuned into World News tonight, and they were talking about they were talking about the cities changing, and it was about that white people were going to be the minority in the country. And that's why I brought up that a lot of this fear is stoked in this idea that what has happened to Black and brown people is now going to happen to them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, when you even think about some of the most recent legislation, that's just not true. I mean, you think about Medicare for all. What are we trying to do? We're trying to bring around everyone who is disproportionately does not have free health care. When you think about the Poor People's Campaign, it's like it's Black folk leading those efforts saying, let's bring along everyone who is not get a living wage and who's working. Working people should be able to have a home and eat. And there is enough to go around. But I will tell you, internalized racial oppression, ignorance, capitalism causes us to say things like, well, I don't know if I think billionaires should be the ones to fund Medicare and Medicaid, but why not? Like, I don't know if you've ever done the exercise where you try to spend $1 billion. It is virtually impossible. Everything you do brings you more money.
Listen, I try to spend $1 billion every day. So,
like, do you remember when Warren Buffett gave away 99% of his? And guess what?
He's still wealthy.
And still one of the wealthiest. So,
But we're not here to talk about.
We're not.
We're not here to talk about intersectionality or anything like that. So.
Yeah, no, or critical race theory.
Or critical race theory. That's not what we're trying to do today. I'm gonna bring up some of your friends.
Okay.
Hopefully they're on camera. If they're not on camera, we'll figure that out. And then I'm gonna step away for a little bit.
Huh? Deidre says she's not. So let's bring on some other folks.
I'm gonna bring on Shanita.
Okay.
And then if Tina's gonna be on camera or not.
Hi, Janita.
Hi.
And then we have Doc. Do you know what Doc?
Let me turn my camera the right way. I know how StreamYard works. How was I not following the StreamYard rules?
Follow the StreamYard rules. And is Monty with you?
Yes. Monty. She's always here. My sidekick.
I think I know who Doc is. Is that Dr. Roberts in his car, maybe?
You have to say hi to Miss Nicole.
Hi, Monty.
And then Deidre is joining us, believe it or not. So here we go. I'm going to excuse myself, Dr. Price, just for a little bit. I'll be in the background, but the floor is yours.
Monty, I saw you on television.
Did you have fun? Tell everybody what you were doing this summer, what we did. You got to talk loud.
We cooked.
You cooked? Who'd you cook for?
People.
What kind of meals did we make?
Good stuff.
Good stuff. What's your favorite thing to cook, Monty?
Huh?
What's your favorite thing to cook?
Mac and cheese.
Mac and cheese.
And
I like mac and cheese. Hi, Deidre.
There's a girl. I had her listening, but she had one of my earbuds in. You got busted us eating. It's been one of those weeks. It's back to school, so I gotten home at like 8 or 9 o'clock every night this week.
I know. I feel like I realized that school was starting on the 9th and went into panic mode about July 15th. I was like, wait, what?
So these are all those things that I just don't have to worry about now that Khalid's like 22.
Lucky.
Yes.
Well, it's worse when you're trying to open schools yourself and get your own kid in school. Thank God Scudder's responsible.
Yes, I bet so. I was trying to get him to come on today to talk about what it was like the year that I started my business, because I did talk to him a couple weeks ago, and I was wondering if he knew that I was like in a panic, and he said he had no idea, none. So I think I did a good job. Just keep swimming, Dora.
Right, that's it. And then they get 25 and they're like, oh, you made it look so easy. And you're like, you did not even know that I was like up at night, in a sheer panic for like years.
I had one client who would always pay their invoices like 6 months late. And I never like to hound people. And at one point I had $85,000 worth of outstanding invoices.
Oh no.
And I'm just like, oh my God, what in the world, But you don't want people to know that you're like,
right
there on the edge.
You just want to be like, it's cool, but hi.
Hey, me.
You know what though? Then I had a lawyer write this ridiculous contract where it was like for every day that you don't pay, I added like $100, and that just like
Yes, yes. When I added late fees, it went
yeah,
away. And so
like
I,
ridiculous late fees. He was like, you have to make it so astronomical that people will be like,
ooh, let me pay on time, because it was the biggest clients who were late. It wasn't people who didn't have the money. It was just they didn't get around to it. You know, oh, I forgot to submit it to payroll or to purchasing. You know, so it's gonna.
they're like, oh, we're gonna put that in the mail. You're like, actually, leave that at the front desk. I'll be stopping by later on today. After 3, is that good for you? Great. I'll stop by and pick it up.
Yeah, 5 years though. 5 years.
I can't,
You
you know
know,
what?
I
After 2 years of just this whole like experiencing what you do, I just hats off. Like, I do not know how you have been in this work for 5 years. I'm tapped out to 18 months and I'm like, y'all can have it. Like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do it.
The work is
It's
different than
amazing.
social media too. You know, I was telling Erica earlier, when I'm doing the work in session with people, I'm not arguing, right? I know what's fact and what's opinion. I'm just trying to move people along. So wherever they are, I just need them to be a little better. And that's been really helpful. That's been really helpful. Deidre,
I
where are
think
you
the shock.
from?
so I came outside. I'm at Longhorn, but I had to come outside because you know where I live. I live out in
Oh,
Raymore, and so as we're talking about schools and race and the opening of schools and race, I find it extremely interesting and ironic who has masks in place and is requiring them in schools and who is not. And there's very, very clearly a racial divide there. I also, as a person that runs schools, have to have conversations about masks. Who, Lord, you talk about trying to keep your neutral face and share a policy because ours is now that you have to be vaccinated or you get tested because of the communicable environment of an early
mm-hmm.
childhood center. And so it has been extremely challenging. Some of it is along race. The majority of our staff are people of color, but it's challenging with my own people to have conversations where it's very clear that generation upon generation upon generation has not trusted systems, has been robbed of information. And so now, rapidly, in an hour presentation about our policy, I'm trying to catch them up. And I'm like, oh Lord, the void is so clear. It is so
Yes,
clear.
yes,
And it's so challenging. And so it makes it hard to keep doing the work when you're dealing with that day in and day out too, on top of the work itself.
Look,
yeah,
I have to quote that Bible scripture. As for me and my house, we gonna wear a mask. I don't care what your policy is. I didn't even need to read the school mask policy because she was wearing one. I was like, I don't
Right,
care what y'all's
right.
policy is. She's wearing a mask. I'm sending hand sanitizer. We're doing all the things. So no.
Yep, yep,
yeah.
yep.
It's been interesting because I say that this goes back to the leadership decisions we make. You can't put someone in the highest leadership levels who does not have empathy, compassion, understands the breadth of their power and the emotional wake of being a leader. So some of this mass confusion is not necessarily directly related to the history of health disparities and health trauma. To Black people, a lot of it is because of the mass hysteria and confusion caused by our president at the time when it came out. And I was
I don't you think some of it though,
go ahead.
Nicole? Don't you think some of it is related to? I don't. I have. I apologize that I haven't tuned into you recently, but I don't know how you feel about Black Lives Matter. But for me, Black Lives Matter was not necessarily like Black people forming it. It was more of white folks putting a message out about how our lives matter. That I digress. But I feel like there is the collision and intersection of all that's going on with civil unrest, and that becomes the primary narrative surrounding why we don't have to wear masks because it's white people telling us to do it.
No, because as Black people and as a culture, there's other things where we feel like masks are appropriate, i.e., I'm not allowing the eyelash technician to lean over my face for hours without a mask on, i.e., I'm not going to the dentist to allow them to work in my mouth without a
I
mask
get
on.
it. Yes.
So if you're not going to allow the eyelash technician, the dentist, the eye doctor, and anybody else that close to your face without a mask on, you can't tell me that you don't understand why you should wear a mask as it relates to COVID-19.
Here's what I think is fascinating, because I think this week was the first time I even talked about COVID, and I think the scientist in me was just I couldn't take it with some of the stuff that people were saying. But for me, when you know someone has COVID, you treat them like they have the plague.
Right.
So, why wouldn't you just assume
I assume everybody has it.
Assume I have COVID. You should assume I have COVID, even vaccinated. And I think social media in this level setting where it's like anybody's opinion, depending on how many followers they have, is equal to scientific evidence, that's problematic, you know? And people say, well, I researched it. And what they mean when they say research, they looked at somebody's video. But we have the likes of...
Or somebody's social media post. Yeah, like just a little 10 lines.
Yes.
Or YouTube.
And
YouTube, the medical university of YouTube.
Did you all not get your chickenpox vaccine? Or what about measles and polio vaccine? Do you not have that vaccine?
I know people are like, we're going to have to carry a COVID card. You literally have one, ma'am. Go to the state of Missouri and you can look at all of the vaccines you've ever had in your whole entire life on their website. What are you talking about? Like, literally, it's no different than all the other vaccinations that you just had.
Yeah, but it's been racialized. And I think but part of that, I believe, I'm still putting that solidly on our leader. I put that solidly on our leader. If you had a white president who was listening to the science and pivoting according to science and not suggesting people drink bleach, you know, I mean, think about it. Herman Cain died at one of these rallies. You just had a Texas GOP leader die after doing a mask burning scenario.
The Topeka governor or somebody is having some type of heart surgery because of some COVID-related health issues.
And rural hospitals are packed to the max.
Our hospitals are almost packed to the max.
And I'm
because they overflow from the rural areas.
I'm just grateful that I'm not sick at all. But I will say, the 5 years that I've been doing this, there's a few things I had to learn. One, I do take a day off every week. So I am usually working 4 days, not 3. I mean, not 5. And then another thing that I do is really try not to be surprised. I can be disappointed all day, but racism and bigotry and hatred is... Why would I be surprised when someone shows up?
And I have to be honest, I was surprised. Now, not that people are racist or bigoted or any of that. I understood that. But I think that over the last 18 months, the levels, that's the part that surprised me, where you're like, I mean, I knew that you were suspect, but not to this degree. And it seems like because of the political environment that we were in, like people will just say anything now. And I'm just like,
I just hope we remember this when we decide to vote. I mean, because truly there were people I know very well who decided that they were going to give 45 a chance. And my thing was, you can't take those kind of gambles with leadership. You know, and I was so grateful when Twitter finally said, no, we got to cut this off, because that is part of our problem. I was sitting next to a man on a plane, and he was just convinced that the federal government created COVID and this whole thing was orchestrated via...
I've had this conversation with people too. Yeah. I'm like, okay, so you mean the world governments that can't agree on anything got together and said, ooh, Let's create a virus that kills people. On top of the fact that most of these other countries have universal health care, which means it's on the government's bill. So they created a virus that puts people in hospitals that they then have to pay for. Why don't they just blow up the buildings if they want to get rid of people?
Yeah.
That would be a lot cheaper.
Yeah, and I also think that another reason why I wasn't surprised was that I get to be in all white spaces and some of those very rural spaces often where, you know, here in the Midwest, I think it's what's challenging in the Midwest is someone will come to your house, eat your food, hug your baby, and be the biggest bigot ever.
Oh gosh.
And that typically doesn't happen, you know, in places where people are, you know, less Midwest nice. And so I just got to see what it looked like live and in living color when we water weeds and put them in the sunny spots in our garden. That's what happens. You know, you cannot give the microphone or give all that nourishment to weeds. And that's what we were doing. We were saying, you know what? Yeah, let's let a white nationalist be on television having a conversation about, you know, white nationalism. For why? And talk about very fine people on both sides. No, what's the other side of that? Like, and
I
then
didn't get it.
when people get together and say Jews will not replace us and mow down Heather Heyer, and I know her mother, by the way, has been sending her all kinds of love because that rally was yesterday. The anniversary of that rally was yesterday, and Heather's been gone now. I think yesterday would have been when was that? 4 years, 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
I don't know. I'm telling you, I'm so unplugged from that. Remember when I posted like about 2 months ago, like I had outrage fatigue? Like I was like, unplug. That's enough. Because I'm like, there's too many things for me to be outraged about. And now I'm just tired. Like, I just don't even know.
I think that's another thing too. I don't know that anger, like people, when James Baldwin, and I love James Baldwin, so whenever I say this, I always pause. When James Baldwin says to be relatively conscious isn't to be in a constant state of rage, I actually disagree with that. In fact, if you know,
right, because how could you? That's
well,
a lot.
And if you know about systemic racism, there's no reason to be enraged. This is what it is. And so now what can we do to work? Like we've all been this.
Yeah. And I think that's maybe the part that has fatigued me is that there seems to have been all this outrage, but not any work. And it's like, okay, well, that's the equivalent of me like being in a restaurant and being upset because my kitchen staff is not doing well and I'm throwing plates and cussing people out. And then we go home at the end of the night and we do that all over again the next day. Like, I don't want to retrain people. I don't want to look at like restaurants. I don't want to look at policies and procedures and make adjustments. No, I just want to come here every day and throw plates and curse people out and then go home and throw plates and curse people out.
I think it's also important to make sure in your circle you got people who are actually doing work. I mean, because there's plenty work being done. You know, when I'm on social media and people are like, you know, you just got to, you know, bigots are everywhere. You just got to ignore them. That's ridiculous. We just got suspensions at K through 12 education in Kansas City public schools. There's a moratorium on them. That's because people are working. That didn't just happen, you know, and I think there's a difference between those of us who, you know, I get online and I express myself every Friday, but you know, I rest every week and then I get back to work. You know, like what is my small little space in the world? And there are a lot of people who are working on this, and the challenge is that anti-intellectualism. People are like, it's okay to not be smart.
And right, because everybody's graduated from Facebook University. I posted that. There's enrollments going on right now. People are enrolling. You need no qualifications, and you can get on this thing and you can say whatever you want to say. And if it feels good in somebody's spirit, they're like, you show right. And
let me share it. So I think that's one, anti-intellectualism and voter suppression and voter disengagement. This idea that my vote does not count, I'm not going to vote, I don't have to vote. Man, I just have been shocked at the levels to which that has occurred. And then you look up.
But do you think that goes back to like, you know, like our generation, we were taught like civics and how government works, right? And that goes all the way back to like Schoolhouse Rock. But I don't really remember like my my older kids, I don't really remember them teaching them like that. And so I feel like their little generation has gotten to a point where they're like, it doesn't matter.
My son took civics, but that could have been because it was an elective and I told him he needed to take civics. But I just don't know about citizens who are underinformed. One of my first sessions this morning was from my friend Tracy, and she's a new citizen here in the States. And she told me that nothing on the citizenship test has anything to do with the racial history of America. Not one question.
Mm-mm.
And so as we are bringing in new citizens, they are underinformed. And that's what I mean when I say anti-intellectualism. So what I decided 5 years ago was if I was going to do this work, I wasn't working with hateful people. If you don't have empathy, I'm not your person. I am there for anybody who has empathy, plenty of it. And however, they're still not doing the work. And so because of that, what I'm typically doing is trying to get people to think differently.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely.
Marisol loves the fact that you're saying Facebook University graduate.
Girl, these people get on here. I'm like, now where did you get that from? Do y'all? A quick little hey Google to your Alexa or whatever you have could probably debunk whatever it is that you're doing. Because we ask Alexa, she knows everything from people's ages to where they were born. So I'm sure she can find that information out for you people. Y'all just get on here saying any old thing.
Yeah, I was really shocked with people, honestly, when they were like, "Oh, well, the vaccine got created really swiftly," because I was one of those people early on, right? Like early on, none of us had the information we needed. But as more and more information started coming out about epidemiologists who have studied COVID-19 for decades, I was like, okay, so this is legit. Like, if you had to cook, Shanita, for, I don't know, 6,000 people, and you had to do it by yourself, it's going to take you a long time. But if you got a whole crew, you can get it done faster. And so I'm like, the whole world was working on this problem. Of course, they got it done faster.
Not to mention that we don't understand that the flu vaccine gets adjusted annually and very quickly. Remember when our little babies, our sons are both 20s. Remember when rotavirus came out in their 20s?
Yeah.
Right? And it was, now there's a rotavirus vaccine. We're not all freaking out about that. You know what I'm saying? So we are expecting like technology to move like it moved 10, 20 years ago. Things are moving faster. We can get across the world faster. Why wouldn't we expect scientists who have nothing to do but to work on this? They said, drop everything you're doing.
And
it's a strand of SARS that's been around since 2012. So it's really not new medicine anyway. It is a variation of something that's been around that we've been trying to work to address for a while. We had a Black pediatrician come speak to our staff last week to help them better understand, and educate them about it, because I think it goes back to where I started this conversation with the being robbed of the information, the misinformation of our people.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna jump off because my son just got here for his birthday, but I love you.
Well, tell your son that he shares a birthday with my business.
Yeah, well, it was on Monday, really, but he came. We're doing it today. Yeah.
Well, we're both
when you're the third baby of the first group, sometimes this might be his third birthday party in his whole life. Like, I just couldn't get it together.
All right, Chef Shanita, it is always a pleasure. When Outside opens back up, we'll have a big celebration to celebrate my birthday and my business birthday. Take care.
I'm out of there now. They won't kick me out. I can say a little bit more controversial than I felt like I still got to live out here.
I don't know. Listen, I think.
What'd you say?
There's so much. There's what makes this harder for me many times is that people are like, well, you need to keep politics out of it. We just want to know about, diversity, or we just want to know about inclusion. And it's like, well, when things are exclusionary by legislation, how do you have that conversation?
Or the other being, what in our life doesn't have some layer of politics to it? There's politics within families. Like, I mean, like it's like I was so naive when I started out in education. And then when I left working for a school district and started running a nonprofit, I thought, oh, I won't have any politics to work with anymore. There's no elected school board members. Man, I have so many layers of politics, and the biggest is the politics within the neighborhood where I lead, and trying to figure out
Who's
where the
running
bodies
things?
are buried and who's mad, and you typically don't know till you tick somebody off.
Yep. And listen, I learned that in church. You think you got something going on, honey. And the sister who ain't saying no words is the one who's running that church. She ain't got no board seat, nothing.
I'm gonna make Skylar come on and tell you happy birthday, business birthday.
Okay. Hey, Skylar.
Hi. Happy business birthday.
Thank you. It's good to see you. I was telling the team that you might be joining us.
Yes, ma'am. Most definitely will. Ow.
What did you eat?
Sorry,
Skylar's like,
connected to the car. Can you hear? Can you hear?
I didn't hear what she said. I can hear you, but I didn't hear what she said.
Stuff. I didn't even get to say anything. It keeps connected to her car. Sorry.
Are you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here.
Talk to her. There you go.
So of course, Skylar.
I don't know. She's confusing me. I'm stuck. I'm like, okay.
I like what you're doing with
you
your
know-
hair.
Thank you.
The interesting thing is, Nicole, is what Skylar, tell her what you said about what your school district said about masks.
I believe they're just encouraging them. I don't think
Yeah, they are.
I don't think they're enforcing masks this year.
And what did you say you were gonna do?
I'm still wearing a mask.
There you go. And I didn't have to tell her.
You know, I know people who are vaccinated who did get COVID, and I just think it's inconvenient. Like they weren't sick or anything, but you got to quarantine. It's just inconvenient, just
Exactly. It's just a waste of time. If you're gonna get the vaccine and not wear a mask, and then you're going to deal with the consequences again of having to quarantine and do all that. And I don't know what people are doing outside of school. So it's like you're coming in a closed space and being with people that you're not with on a regular basis. So, and that's switching around to classes all day, every day, going to lunch. Like we're going back to a regular 5-day routine. So,
well, you just be careful.
I will.
You just be careful. And thank you so much. It has been fabulous. Edgar, thank you for having me on.
Dr. Price, I have one final question for you. Deidre, by the way, twice in one day?
I know, man.
Within hours?
Hey, Nicole, and I'm gonna get to whoop him every day when he brings that baby in my center.
Isabel's going over there.
I won't be there. Baby. She's in for it now.
I love Isabel. She's their brand strategist.
I told him nobody's going to show up for your meetings anymore because the baby's going to be with us during the day. So that was your grab. Like that's how you got people to show up. What are you going to do?
I know. Whenever I saw a picture of Isabel, I was like, love. Like, let me get my little reaction.
Dr. Price, let me ask you. My final question for you is: anything that you didn't cover today that you wanted to cover? Any words that you didn't share that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I think so. Hate never stops. It's like weeds growing outside. We got to always like pull on them. But the work that the rest of us have to do, I think what happens is we get weary in well-doing because we're sometimes focused too much on the weeds. And I think we can pivot. There's some good work happening, and we just need to elevate that work. Everyone I know in history who's ever done anything amazing, they were just regular old people. And some of my favorites, when I think about Dr. Martin Luther King and his struggle with depression, and some of the other challenges that he's had, just with his personal relationships, he smoked cigarettes, for goodness sake. Like, just where regular people can do extraordinary things. And I just need more people getting into the fight and stop sitting, in the seats in the arena. That's one thing.
I love that, and it's a good way to end. Well, assuming that you don't have more lives, assuming you're not going on Instagram, assuming that you're going on TikTok,
I have not done TikTok today. I should probably do a TikTok dance.
Just a TikTok dance, a final cherry on top of a phenomenal day. Well, you're doing extraordinary things. I know that the community appreciates it. And congratulations to you on a phenomenal 5 years.
Guess what we just did this week?
What was that?
So the Lively Paradox virtual training platform, we've always been able to provide it in Spanish, but now we even have closed captioning in Spanish. So if we have folks with ability challenges, either hearing or visual, we have closed captioning in Spanish too.
See, ahead of the game.
I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's so important, and it creates the spaces of belonging that are so needed in our community. So, thanks for ending the conversation with us tonight, Dr. Price.
Yes.
Enjoy the rest of your evening. I hope you enjoy. I can't wait to see what you do tomorrow.
All right. I usually wake up and decide what I'm going to talk about in the morning.
All right.
All right. See you Filter Free
Have a good
Friday.
evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye.